beautiful souls. Welcome to a new show on Living Naturally with Michaela live, where we talk about all things for living a naturally healthy life. Welcome to today's episode. We are going to be diving into a powerful topic on how movement helps release trauma and promotes emotional healing. I'm joined today by Dr. Michelle Greenwell, our resident Tai Chi and movement specialist, and we're going to be exploring body-based healing approaches today. We often think of trauma as something purely emotional or mental, but it actually lives in the body. So today we will break down why that happens and how movement can help. Before we jump in, let's start off with asking Dr. Michelle what is in her cup today. As you guys know, she is also our resident tea expert. So, what's in your cup today, Dr. Michelle?
Thank you, Michaela. It's so funny because everywhere I go now, that's what people ask. What have you got in your cup? So I have a new blend, which I thought the affirmation today was going to be perfect for our conversation
Mm-hmm.
and trying to find the right tea for trauma and movement and releasing and letting people really have a healing session while we do our conversation today. So I have 1909, the first flight on Bedeck Bay. So I'm just looking at my logo just because it has the silver dart on there. And the first flight was in the US, which is where you are. But
Mm-hmm.
shortly after that, they came up and they did the flight here just down the road from where I am, which is really
Wow.
cool. And the affirmation is preparation, belief, and collaboration provide an aerial focus for success. So I just want to invite people to think about who they have in their community and network that can bring them into the healing space, and in what ways are they already prepared, and do they believe they have the opportunity to heal, and do they believe that they can move forward. So I'm going to leave that with people as they prepare their cup of tea, and here's
Awesome.
mine. So thanks for asking.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to jump on the bandwagon because I also have one of your teas in my cup today. So, and today I chose Power Pack because I felt like that one was also spoke to what we're going to talk about today. So the essence behind the Power Pack, according to Dr. Michelle, who created this tea, is the fire element supports processing, clearing, and enhancing the most important aspects of joyful living. And I feel like sometimes, particularly when we're dealing with trauma, it takes a lot of bravery and interpersonal strength and power to be able to face that and let that go. So I thought that this would be a good tea for that. I just happen to like apple and cinnamon too. So sometimes I pick teas based on the flavor and just what I want to drink that day. As many of you can probably tell from my voice today, it's not in the best right now, but we are going to do this because this is an important topic. So bear with me as I go through this. All right, so let's go ahead. Oh,
Cheers.
cheers. Oh, and I am actually using my Gilmore Girls cup today because I am an avid Gilmore Girls fan. So if you're wondering what's on my cup instead of what's in my cup, this is one of my Gilmore Girls cups. So, yay. All right,
I
cheers.
have Cape Breton Island.
All right. Awesome. Well, let's jump into the conversation. We are going to start with understanding trauma and the body's response. So, before we have any discussion, I think it's, very important for us to understand just what that is. So, trauma isn't just a memory. It gets stored in the body and it impacts the nervous system. And the body reacts to that through the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. I know you all have heard of that, although you probably just heard fight, flight, or freeze, but fawn is also a response to that as well. And unresolved trauma can manifest as chronic tension, pain, and fatigue that gets lodged in the body. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the signs of that in a little bit. But it's just important for you to understand that trauma isn't just a memory, it actually gets stored in the body. And movement is one way to gently process and release these stored emotions. A lot of people think, okay, I got all these emotions, I got to talk about it, and this, that, and the other. While that helps some people, you don't always have to talk about it to release it. And that's what we're talking about today. Movement, the right kinds of movement, can actually help you release that stored emotional trauma that has found itself embedded in your body. So, Dr. Michelle, from your experience, how do you see trauma showing up in the body? And what are some common signs that you see that someone may be holding on to trauma?
How about a stiff neck,
Stiff neck, yep.
right? People who clench their jaw. You have these energy pathways that are passing right through the soft palate of the mouth.
Yeah.
And guess what's there? And the vagus nerve is coming up in behind the ear. And if this all goes tight, your
Yeah.
entire nervous system is going to be dysregulated. And
Yeah.
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 The other one is feet, because a
Feet.
lot of people end up rolling on their feet in different ways, having pain points, lose the power in the muscles, and then have ankles. They can't rise up on their toes because their ankles are going to wobble. And that's all a sign of where things are stored and how things are happening. And those are just two simple ones, because I'm sure many people can also
Yeah.
identify with that lower back.
Yes, yes, and one of the others too that I see is that mid back tension, like right between the shoulder blades. That's
Mhm.
another one too that I think a lot of people experience that they can recognize that there's something there. So that all of that neck, shoulders, and that mid back is very, very common. And yeah, you're absolutely right. The feet. A lot of people don't think about the feet, and we've talked about the feet before in some of our
Mm,
other shows. The feet are is they are very, very important. And they're also one of the places that will show the signs of emotional distress and trauma. And a lot of people don't realize that. So many times when people, now I'm going to start talking about the mind body connection, because that's what I do. Many times when people are talking about feeling stuck in whatever that is, whether it's life or job or whatever, lots of times their feet will hurt and they don't put those two together. So feet is it's all about lack of movement, moving forward, that kind of thing. So yeah,
mhm.
so thank you for giving me your insight on what you see. So the next thing that we need to discuss is movement as a pathway to emotional release. Like I said, uh, emotions are not just something, the trauma is not just something we think about that's in our memories and has these emotions attached to it. So I'm trying to separate trauma from emotion, because they're two different things, but trauma usually has an emotion associated with it. So when I say emotions get stuck in your body, emotions do get stuck in your body. Trauma also gets stuck in your body. Okay, so they manifest and show up different ways. And usually they go together. So sometimes they're stuck in the same place. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of clarify that a little bit. So if you hear me going back and forth between trauma and emotions, just understand that we're talking about just this whole big ball of emotional energy that's getting embedded and stuck in the body in different places. Although we're talking about trauma today, there is always some sort of emotion that is associated with it. So when we're releasing the emotion and we're talking about releasing the trauma, we're talking about releasing all of that, the emotions and the trauma that goes with it. So, as we start off by saying, these things get stuck in particular parts in the body. So, some key places, we talked about the shoulders, we talked about the jaw and the lower back, the neck, but also the hips. So those are usually going to be places where trauma will get stuck. Emotions can get stuck in all over the body, and they may not cause pain and tension and all that kind of stuff, but trauma, big ball, when it gets stuck in there, it will cause that pain, that tension, that nervous dysregulation. So that's why we're talking about trauma. And movement is one of those things that can help release that stored tension. So if you think of trauma equals tension, and movement releases the tension, which helps release the trauma. Okay, so we just want you to follow that. So even simple movements like shaking, which is actually one of my favorites, sounds weird, but I love it. Stretching, slow, mindful walking, all of those can be very, very powerful for emotion release. But I'm going to turn this part of the discussion over to Dr. Michelle because she is a Tai Chi and mindful movement specialist. And this is kind of where she does her thing. I mean, I do a little bit, I'm more into yoga and the somatic practices, and, which is more, soft, I guess you could say. And hers is more about intentional movement for that balance and that release. So I'm going to let her take over this part of the conversation, particularly since, this is where her field of study is. So she knows what she's talking about. So, how does Tai Chi and mindful movement help people process emotions that are stored in their bodies? And have you seen any examples of people having like really big emotional breakthroughs just through movement? I mean, I work with people and all different kind of levels. We'll do energy release, we'll do emotion release. I will give them, some physical stuff to do. But have you seen like big breakthroughs with just the movement? That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah. It's funny as you're saying that because last night for our Tai Chi class,
Uh-huh.
we had several traumas that came through the door, which was really interesting because that doesn't usually happen. But somebody had slipped, tripped over the curb, fallen, did a face plant, broke their glasses, scratched up their face, um, landed on their knees. That was one. But we have another one that has a husband that almost died. That she's been trying to nurse back to health. So these are big issues. These are big
Hmm.
deals that they're working with, and they come into class and they don't want to burden us with what's going on. But one of the first things is, and I talked about it with the tea, is finding that sense of community. They
Hmm.
feel really safe to be able to come into the space. So we create this beautiful home for people to sit, and nobody's judging. We're just like, where are you today? And here's all the things that have gone on in my life. You go, okay. And then we go to town. And sometimes we don't talk at all, but last night there was a lot. We were just trying to what happened to you? They come in and their face is bruised and they've got new glasses. And then we have, just following up with how are the family members going? How's your husband's recovery coming, etc. But then we start moving, and we start with simple movements. We're not trying to go into the spot that's sore or hurt or stuck. We're moving body parts all over.
Hmm.
And those are just gently nudging everything else. And in that space, we start to create a harmony into all the systems. And that harmony releases in those areas that are stuck. And so last night, everybody who finished, shoulders were back, necks were lifted, smiles on faces, chatting away on the way out the door about all the fun things in life.
Yeah.
Have completely forgotten about what came in the door and how they didn't want to burden us. That was all gone.
Mhm.
And then that deep sense of community that
Mhm.
resulted because we moved together. Um, and I know that's probably a little bit different answer than you were
No,
thinking
no,
about.
no, no. I love that answer because actually, one of the places I wanted to go with this conversation a little bit later was the whole safety aspect.
Mhm,
And community creates that safety that allows that release.
mhm. Yeah.
And and I think it's very important for people who are trying to release trauma to feel like it's safe to do so. That's what allows them to let it go rather than holding on to it. So, yeah, so you've already you've already touched on part of what I wanted to go later. So no, I love that answer. So it's a great answer. It's a great answer.
And just based on what you said too, I'm thinking a couple of thoughts. One is that if you have an injury, and that can be an emotional one, you need to work at only 40% effort.
Mm,
And so many people, when they think about movement, they think, oh, I should go run. I should go and like get rid of some of this extra pent up emotion. Sometimes when you back up and you just go really soft and gentle, you notice how everything starts to open.
yeah,
And that creates a completely different experience with movement. So I just wanted to bring that forward because that's one of the rules of Tai Chi is 40% effort. As a dancer, we never did that. Dancer, you get it, one, you'd have to do what's required of you. But the second part is if you're dancing for yourself, you
right.
put a good piece of music on, you're going to move the way that you want to move and the way you enjoy. And if it's that you can't move by standing, but you've got to be seated, you can still have so much joy
Yeah,
moving from a chair. And so it may not be the 40% effort that Tai Chi would have, but it has this incredible joy that goes with it. And the body, the tissue is responding and
yeah,
it's figuring out that it's safe and it doesn't have to hold on. It can let go and allow you to move through. And sometimes that's enough to change your mindset.
yeah,
So instead of thinking the mind has to control the movement, it's you do the movement and all of a sudden the mind is released.
yeah,
And that's
yeah.
just beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean, I actually do practice Tai Chi, but for our conversations, I don't discuss that because it's like I'm nowhere near the expert that you are. Um, One of the things I love about Tai Chi is that for me, it's so fluid that it is almost like dancing,
Hmm.
and sometimes I just like to do it just to lift my mood.
Hmm.
Because when I do it, I can feel the energy moving through my body, and so it like opens up these channels and these flows that and I could do just like 3 to 5 minutes, and my mood instantly gets lifted.
Hmm.
So I love that about. I mean, I do yoga too. I like yoga. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes I just want to just move my arms and sway a bit. And Tai Chi is great for that. And it does help me to release tension that's in my body that I'm holding on to for whatever is going on for the day or that kind of thing. And if you're proactive with it, it will keep it from building up as well. And then it
Hmm.
becomes even more problematic down the road, which is a lot of what I deal with because most of the times the clients that I deal with, they come to me when it's gone so far that it's become chronic, and now we have to like take the steps to start, pulling everything back.
Unwinding.
So
Yes.
yeah. So I think it's very important that we're having this conversation to help people understand that you can also be proactive to be able to allow you to release stuff as it comes up before it becomes so embedded and so stored in the tissues that you have to do that much more in order to release it. So, yeah.
Hmm. One of my favorite things is, when you go to the dentist and you're lying in the chair and you're like, oh, here comes the freezing or here comes the drill or whatever. And then that, oh, this reaction, right? In my head, I just lie back and start doing the Tai Chi set in my head.
Mm.
And the whole body goes, oh, you're doing Tai Chi. And it just completely relaxes. And then I have no idea how long I've been there because I was so busy working on it. And I've used Tai Chi in bed when I can't sleep as well.
Yeah,
If I wake up or I can't go to sleep, then I'll start doing the Tai Chi set. I never get past the seventh or eighth move
right.
because it just immediately the body reacts, the whole tension drops out, things start to open up, and that's the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
there you have it, movement without movement.
Movement without movement, yeah. It's
Because
powerful.
but that's a testament to, again, to the mind body connection and how powerful the mind is in all of this too.
Mhm.
The fact that you can think about the movement and your mind it is your mind is moving, so the
Mhm.
body responds.
Yeah.
Isn't
Yeah.
that amazing the way that our bodies are so interconnected and that we can literally use, all of these other tools to do all kinds of great things that can help keep our bodies healthy. So,
And I just as you were saying that, I've never thought of it this way, but in Chinese medicine, each organ system has its own emotions. So they get pocketed in different sections of the
mhm.
body, which is a really good mechanism because can you imagine if all the emotions pocketed into one spot? The bucket could get very full
Yes.
and overflow, right? And you'd have a lot of trouble in one spot, but the body is so brilliant, it spreads everything out and allows for the space and allows for if you've got a lot of grief in your life happening at that moment, you have other parts that can pull
Yeah,
and just nudge and pull that grief and soften it. And then it pulls you into some other things. And then pretty soon the grief is a little bit softer.
right.
If we didn't have that brilliance happening through the systems, yeah, it might be a completely different experience.
Well, there you have it. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about the science because I'm the science girl. I know I always laugh at that because I am all into the science and how everything connects and all of that kind of stuff. If you're just listening to some of our conversations for the first time, part of my story is that I originally came from a tech background. And so my running joke is that I switched from computer systems to body systems. So I'm all about the connectivity and the science about how everything, connects and the mind and the body connection and how it all affects the other. And it works perfectly well with my naturopathy and my naturopathic approach now because that's also about mind, body, and spirit and how everything's interconnected and you cannot separate them. So it works really great for me. So,
Mhm.
so let's talk a little bit about the science. So we've already touched on a little bit. Trauma not only affects the body in general, it affects the nervous system. And part of the effect on the nervous system is that we tend to get stuck in either hyper arousal mode, which is anxiety, or we get stuck in shutdown mode, which is kind of like numbness. And everybody knows what those words mean: shut down and anxiety. So you're either going to be way up here or you can be way down here. Both of those are trauma responses in the nervous system. Okay. And Michelle has already talked a little bit about the vagus nerve and how the vagus nerve is intricately involved in this. Okay. The vagus nerve goes from here to here, it goes all the way through our body and it touches on almost everything. And movement actually helps regulate the vagus nerve, which can help shift the body from stress mode to calm mode. And that's what we really want. And so there has been research that have actually shown that trauma informed movement reduces cortisol, which is stress hormone, and improves our emotional resilience. So I printed off some stuff, and if anybody wants this, just ask me for it. I'm more than happy to share it with you. But there was a 2017 study published in Frontiers of Psychology that found that trauma sensitive yoga significantly reduced cortisol levels in individuals with PTSD. And PTSD is basically a hyper response, a hyper stress response. Okay. Um, there was also a Harvard Medical School study on Tai Chi that showed how regular practice lowered stress hormones, and improved emotional regulations with individuals with anxiety and trauma histories. Then there was also a 2020 study in the psychological trauma theory, research, practice, and policy that showed that trauma informed movement helped survivors regain a sense of control over their own bodies, which led to an increased emotional resilience and reduced symptoms of PTSD. All right, so the keys to this is that movement helps regulate the vagus nerve. It helps release the stuck energy, and it promotes the mind body connection. Trauma disconnects us from our bodies, but mindful movement helps restore that. And that's that safety that we needed, that awareness, that trust, that safety factor we needed to release this trauma. So now I'm going to get Dr. Michelle's input on this now that I've thrown my little 2 cents in. Can you explain why slow, repetitive movements like Tai Chi calm the nervous system? And what happens when people that, well, okay, I'll get to that one in a little bit. So tell me, can you explain why the slow, repetitive movements can help calm the nervous system from your standpoint?
So if you have a reaction in the body that you need to run, you need to get away from danger, you're going to have a lot of muscles that are involved in running clench up and tighten because they need that in order to be able to make that run happen. What you want to do is calm that reaction. You want to take that reaction out and replace it with something that's harmonized. And what I like about Tai Chi, and you can do it in somatic dance movements as well, is that you can have this whole body integration. Everything is moving together as a unit. When we're in fight or flight, we have the muscles that are required to help us get away and be safe. But when we're doing whole body integration, we're having every system communicating with the other systems, and it's creating a harmony and a balance. So it brings us out of that state of directness and brings us back into a whole perspective, which is we can then see the whole picture of things. We can hear, all of our senses are alive. Our heart rate can go down. Our blood can gently spiral back through the veins instead of pumping to try to get through the veins. So you have this whole calming effect, but it's a whole body integration. And I think our idea of aerobics, our idea of training, going to the gym is all about targeting specific muscles one at a time.
Yeah.
This is a completely different approach because we're doing everything at once. And we're doing it in a way that if I lift my arm and I pull my little finger, I'm affecting all the way to the opposite ends of my knees through one muscle system. And how lovely is it to know I can move my hand and my knee, which may have been locked up, all of a sudden just lets go.
Mm.
And I didn't have to focus on my knee and go, be better. I just got to go, I'm just going to expand and move. And then the tissue went, oh, I feel better. Now I can do something.
Yeah.
The second part is in Tai Chi, we have different activities we can do. So we can do what people are familiar with 108 moves. That is all about structure. That's about realigning and finding how everything comes back into balance so that the muscles and the bones are all in harmony. But then we go to saber, and the saber patterns are all spirals.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the blood comes through the veins in a spiral. When we spiral our tissue, we wash the bone marrow.
Mm.
So we have this lovely way of nurturing and providing nutrition to the body. And then we go one step further into low cup. And the first part of low cup is about the tendon muscle relationship. And this I'm bringing up because this brings us to emotions.
Yeah.
Our tendons are what regulate those emotions. So if you have a anxiety moment, it can pocket into certain tissue and that tendon is going to lock. That's going to change the dynamic on the muscle.
Yeah.
And in low cup, in the first part of the set, we are gently maneuvering, never repeating a pattern. So it's constantly moving. And we pull on those tendons ever so gently so that the muscles can start to move and we unfreeze everything. After we have accomplished that, the last part of low cup, we go into the organ systems. You talked about the vagus nerve. It's within the fascia, it's wrapping around all the organ systems, and we start pulling on that fascia, which is
Yeah.
a shapeshifter. And we have this opportunity to let the systems all talk to each other, but also to release the tension within. And
Yes.
so there's this harmony that comes through the way these systems work. And the beautiful part is when you start to dive deeper into that, you go back to your structure of Tai Chi, that Tai Chi set is completely transformed because you have these underlying beautiful pieces now that sit in your movement.
Yeah.
Harmony for the
Yeah.
brain. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. I love the way that you described that. I'm just sitting here, as you were describing that in my head, I'm seeing like, these flowy energy patterns just kind of swirling about and stuff. And it's like, so I'm imagining it as you're talking about it, and you start talking about, you know, the the vagus nerve and being the shapeshifter. In my head, I'm seeing, kind of this going, and it's like, yeah. So, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just infinitely fascinated by the connections in our body and what our bodies are capable of.
Mhm.
Where simple movement absolutely can help you release that emotional tension.
Mhm.
You just got to do it, but you also, when you were talking, that also made me again, it brought me back again to the whole safety factor as well, and how you were saying gently nudging, because you cannot stress the body out even more when you're already under stress.
Exactly.
So it has to be gentle, it has to be safe.
And a lot of people will go for a walk and they'll choose a power walk.
Hmm.
And they'll think because it's good for you aerobically. That's, the language that's been used. And absolutely it is. But is it good for you today when you're really feeling you are not your best?
Yes.
Is that the right choice today? Today might be go for that walk where you stand underneath a tree and you enjoy the leaves and the wind blowing and the rustling of the leaves and your senses come alive and you come out of that walk and you're like, okay, I'm ready for my day. Or you come out of the power walk and you're like, I'm exhausted, you
Hmm.
know, and then you either collapse on the couch or make your way to the fridge.
Right.
Another way of coping, right? Um, yeah. And the other piece I wanted to bring up before we leave this part of the conversation is the sense of community, because a lot of times when we have trauma, we have an incident happen, we don't feel well, we pull ourselves away from everyone because we don't want to burden people, or you think they've heard enough of me talk about this issue, and you isolate and then you try to fix from yourself. What I love, it could be yoga practice, could be dance, could be tai chi. When you start to do the activity, you're connecting with all the other people who've done Tai Chi before, or dance or yoga, and all the ones who are participating in it at the same moment. So then you think, I'm not here by myself. I
Yeah.
can't leave the house today. I have to do this at home, but I can connect to all the other people at this moment who chose to do Tai Chi.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah. And then you have the harmony and balance that comes from that. So there's that sense of community that we
Yeah.
started with at the start of the conversation, which is so important for being able to release the traumas and move away from them and really move into the joyful spaces.
Yeah. Which segues right into our next topic of discussion, which is about choosing the right practice. Because as we've been saying, is that not all movement styles are going to work for everyone every time. And
Mhm.
so it's very important to find what feels safe and comfortable for you at that moment. You don't want to go for a power walk when you're trying to release stuff. Although sometimes if you're really super high strung, that power walk may actually help to
It
release
might.
some of that pinned up stuff. So it's very important for you to be aware of your body and what it's saying to you. So we've talked about yoga and Tai Chi. There's also Qigong, dance therapy, other types of trauma informed movement, somatic exercises, even deep breathing can be very good for this type of release for you. So, trauma sensitive movement should feel nourishing and not overwhelming. That's the point I'm trying to make in the
Mhm.
not so short way, is that it should nourish you. It should help you feel safe. It should help you to release, not be overwhelming and stress you out even more because you're already in a state of stress. Whether you're in fight, flight, or freeze is still a state of stress. So you don't want to add more stress where there's already stress. So, what advice do you have for someone who feels disconnected from their body and they don't know where to start? Because we're talking about choosing what's right for you. Some people don't know what's right for them. So, what advice would you give for that?
One would be to move slowly and gently. Less is more. Remember that a trauma is an injury, so it's 40% effort. So you don't have to dive into it. This is going to be the thing that fixes me. No, this is going to be the thing that nourishes you. And the next part is going to be anything that moves the shoulder seam and the hip seam, because it is what sends information back to the brain for the brain to understand what else might be required. And for some people, they might crawl into the tub and have a bubble bath. They might decide to sit in their favorite chair and read a book.
Yeah.
And that does provide you with relaxation. The book might provide you with a distraction and maybe a new idea, depending on what you're doing. But the piece about movement is it allows you to get out of the place where you're stuck and actually moves you to somewhere else. And if you do something where you're walking forward and backward, side to side, crossing your feet over, you're going to be integrating the brain, but you're also going to be including different dimensions. Because some people, we were talking before we started recording about one step forward, two steps back.
Hmm.
And so if you have that happening, sometimes, yes, you do go forward one step, and then it feels like you didn't make progress because more comes on. But if you walk yourself through that, then you can walk forward and back, and the body goes, it's okay if I go back. That's
Yeah.
comfortable. And
Right.
then you can go back forward again. And then you realize it isn't necessarily always going to be straightforward. And
Right.
sometimes you got to rely on your experience and your background. But that opening and closing of the body is really important for getting the brain and the body to connect, and for the brain to come up with the new ideas of what it needs. And the body is feeding that information.
So I'm probably going to put you on the spot here, but what are some common myths you think about movement-based healing?
Oh, you should go to the place that's hurting you. That's the biggest myth for me. You know, a
Oh,
lot
the no pain, no gain. That
oh, yeah, that one, yeah. How many people come in with a shoulder issue, and they're going to try everything to make that bad shoulder better, instead of going, "There's a problem showing up here. Where is it coming from?" And then finding somewhere else to nourish that will instigate what's going to happen over here. And a lot of times it's the opposite shoulder that is actually the issue, but the pain point is what you focus on. And
yeah,
I think the same comes with trauma, is we focus on the trauma instead of focusing on the future and where do we want to go.
yes,
And so for me, um, that's one of the myths, is that you need to focus on the issue at hand, not necessarily. And you can nurture and nudge from so many other places, and you have a choice. And I think it's also a myth that, I'm always going to be healing. I'm always going to be on this healing journey. I'm always going to be, and then it's like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of work. Why would you want to start? But if you come from the place of, I have a choice, I can come from a place of joy, and I can take that experience that I have, and I can find out what it means for me and where it fits, instead of I've got to work at it.
yeah.
It's it doesn't need to be work. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we get into the mindset of it's work, that stresses us out. It immediately causes this visceral reaction of it's work, it's hard work. And it doesn't have to be work. It doesn't have to be hard work. And
Mhm.
and that's part of this conversation. Why I wanted to have this conversation is that it doesn't have to be all of that. Yes, sometimes you do need to work, but sometimes you can just flow and let it go. Or at least begin to let it go. I know sometimes some issues are multi-layered and it'll
Mhm.
take a little bit, but I have this saying that I use with my clients all the time. Something's better than nothing.
Mhm.
And and I say that in my Texas twang. I live in Texas, by the way, for those of you who are listening, um, because baby steps if you have to.
Mhm.
Something is always better than nothing. It's movement. Movement is movement, even if it's a small movement.
Mhm.
And sometimes small movement is better for you,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know? So,
Yeah, I think one of the other myths would be, I'm broken.
mm,
You're not broken. You have courage, you have resiliency, you have this ability to overcome, and you also have a background that's going to provide you with insights that are going to be so valuable to people who need you.
yeah,
And so you're not broken, but you certainly have an opportunity. And if you believe outside of that, then there's only one way to go, which is forward. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Which brings us to the next topic: practical steps on integrating movement for healing. So, we've been telling you about all of these great things that you can do to help, with that trauma and stuff. So, now we're going to dive into things that you can do to help integrate movement for healing. And so, I'm going to start off with my points, and then I'll let Michelle offer her points.
You go first. I love it.
So my first points are start small. Okay. So I know Michelle said this one too. So you're getting it from both of us. Start small. Again, movement is movement. Baby step it if you have to. Even with 5 to 10 minutes of movement daily is more effective than these long, hard. sessions of stuff. Okay. You don't have to go for a 1 hour power walk. You can go for a 5 minute stroll around the neighborhood, and it will do just as much good, if not more, than that power walk. Okay. The second thing is to listen to your body. Again, we've talked about this one too. The whole phrase of no pain, no gain, that does not hold when we're dealing with trauma. Okay. So listen to your body. If the exercise feels overwhelming, physically or emotionally, pause it, take a breath, and reevaluate. Sometimes you can go on with that exercise by, doing a little breath work and it feels better so you can move on. But sometimes you also need to reevaluate. Maybe this is not what I should be doing right now. And it's okay if that's not what you need to be doing right now. Sometimes you have to take care of you. And sometimes that means doing slower, softer stuff. And that's okay. And then my third point would be to combine movement with breath work. I personally think that breath work does so much to help you release and get deeper healing, that if you can combine breath work with whatever you're doing, you will benefit from it that much more. And I know Tai Chi inherently has some breath work associated with it. So that's one of the reasons why we talk a lot about Tai Chi, because it has all of those components. But you can combine breath work with your walk. You can combine breath work with your dance. Try it on and see how that goes. I do have some resources on my website if you guys want them, including some, mindful movements for beginners. Start there if you want. But I'm going to let Michelle jump in on this, because I would like her to not only answer that question, but I would like for her to also offer some sort of gentle movement or breath work to all of you out there that you can start with, because we all want you to be able to heal, and we are about educating you to take care of yourself. So we want you to have those tools in order to make that happen. So, Michelle,
Mm-hmm.
what's one simple movement or exercise that the people that are watching can try today?
I'm going to share something that I did today. I had a funeral before I came here, and while I was listening to one section and the emotions were coming from that, I was doing these pieces in my boots. So I'm going to share it. I'm going to share it. And the other part I wanted to say too is the breath work in Tai Chi is a natural breath work. So we don't worry about how you're breathing. The movements take care of the breathing,
Yeah.
which means you don't have to think about it. So for those people, for me, if I have to count 4 breaths in, hold 4 breaths, that whole thing, that stresses me out. So when I get into Tai Chi and I start moving immediately, I just start opening up my breath. So
Yeah.
that's always lovely. So for those people who might respond as I respond, Tai Chi has that in it. So what I was doing with my feet. Now this is on my YouTube channel at Michelle Greenwell. It's in the cards playlist, and it's called foot sensors.
Mm.
And the foot sensors you can do in a nurturing cycle, or you can do it in a cycle that allows for changing of behavior. So if you want something new, you could do it in a different pattern. But I'm going to do nurturing cycle. So I know you and I are seeing our heads. I'm going to describe this, and people can do it seated or standing. So if you're listening and you can stand up, feel free. And what you're going to do is you're just going to rise up onto the ball of the foot. So lifting the heel up off the floor and then putting it back down flat. And if you're sitting down, you're going to notice that your back is going, and your hips are going to be adjusting as you do it. You also notice your shoulders. So as I
Mhm.
talked about opening those two, we're not quite opening them, but we are adjusting them. So you rise up to the ball of the foot and take it back down flat. You'll notice the calf muscle goes tight
Mhm.
and then it lets go. And there's that fight or flight. We're actually softening that little piece.
Mm. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got that started. I believe that one is centering, the reflex for centering, which is fantastic for kind of bringing you back into the present moment. And then the second one is you're going to go around in a circle. So you go around to the side, of the, just like a clock, around to the side, back to the side, to the toes. And you're just going to roll around. Now, if you're sitting on a chair like we are, and your whole body is doing that. Now, I just did feet while I was, sitting in the pew at the church. Because I didn't want to draw attention, but immediately there's this lovely calming that comes in as you're doing that. And I'm just going to tell you that one is for stability.
Mm.
Okay, so we've got that one. So then what we're going to do is we're going to just lift a toe and then lift a heel. So you could do 1 foot at a time, lift the toe, lift the heel. And you can do it slowly, take your time through it. Or you could do both at the same time, but they're opposite. So if one toe goes up, it's going to be the heel on the opposite side. So you end up doing this rotation back and forth. That one, when you're standing, creates a rhythm pattern, and you find that you just kind of soften into it. And it just
Mm.
feels so lovely. That one's for gravity.
Mm.
And that's how you take effort out of movement, because you start to move with gravity instead of getting pulled down by gravity,
Yeah.
making it a heavier movement. Okay, so now you're going to go side to side. So you're going to roll to the edge of your feet on one side, and then you're going to roll through, and your toes kind of play the piano as you go across, and you're just going to roll from side to side. On our hips, we're actually moving the pelvis from side to side as we do that. All right, and that one is, just let me find it on here, balancing.
Okay.
Okay, so this is bringing life back into balance. And then the next one is, if you put your feet flat, you're going to roll to the inside of the feet, play the piano with the toes, and then roll to the outside edge of the feet. If you're seated, you're going to notice how when you come in, the hips grip, lower back is going to push
Yeah.
open. But then when you roll and you go to the outside edge of your feet, you can feel how you're just pulled forward
Yeah.
and your hips open, but then your lower back closes. So this is a great way to soften what's happening in the hip, but also to release some of the tension that could be in the lower back. And that one is for grounding.
Yeah. I felt that one grounding even before you said that because I let out a sigh right after I
Mm,
did that. And so and for me, that's one of my telltale signs of, release. So yeah. So
right?
yeah. Yeah.
And for people to realize that that sigh is the nervous system has
Mhm.
started to calm. A
Yeah.
yawn can happen.
Yeah.
The eyes can kind of do a flutter.
Yeah.
You could have a shimmy that kind of goes through, or a shiver.
Yeah.
And all those are signs that the nervous system is making a change and it's coming into balance. Yeah, it's lovely. Yeah, that's one of my go-to. My feet are moving all the time. And sometimes I'll just pick up a pattern. I can't remember where in the sequence it is. I just do
Yeah.
whatever. And one of them at a time is totally fine,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
then you're resetting the reflexes, and that changes how your mind is going to work and the way that you're thinking. So you'll start making different kinds of decisions. You'll start noticing different details. You might converse with people in a different way, and you'll take information in differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
And from a trauma perspective, that's important, because trauma can lock you up and
Mm.
keep you from getting some of that information that you do need.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would just like to throw in another exercise too for those who are watching, because I use this one a lot with my clients and with myself. If I find myself in a hyper state and I need to just bring it down really quickly, It's basically a vagus nerve reset. We've been talking about the vagus nerve a lot, okay, and how it's, you know, a big player in a lot of this. And it's so simple to do. You can do it like sitting at your computer, you can do it like sitting in traffic, you know, which can potentially bring in a lot of stress of its own. And all you do is you sit with your head straight, and you're going to move your eyes to the right as far as they can go, just your eyes, not your head. And you're just going to hold them there until you get an involuntary yawn or deep breath. Okay. Then you're going to do the same thing to the left. Just shift your eyes as far as they can go to the left and hold it there until you get a sigh or a deep breath. And you'll know because it's going to be involuntary. And that just helps reset the vagus nerve, and it kind of brings everything down a level. And that's something you can do at any time. And no one even knows that you're doing it, you know? And if they're watching you that close and you see you moving your eyes, okay, so what? You know, maybe they need to not be looking at you that close, you know? So maybe that's your stress. It's like, get out of my face. No. But that's something you can use when you find yourself just, I'm getting stressed out and I need to do something really quickly to just bring it down a notch. You can do that anytime, anywhere, as many times as you need to do it. So that's one of my go tos. I give that one to my clients a lot. I use it a lot. So, yeah. So take that one with you and put it in your toolbox. So,
And what's
right.
interesting is you gave one piece that was with the eyes, and I gave one piece with the feet, and they're actually related to each other. They're very closely related. So that opportunity to influence all the way through the system just came with what we offered. So just for people to realize, you know, put those in the toolbox.
Yep. So we're all about giving you the tools to be able to take care of yourself. Okay. So we're not saying you have to use everything all at once, but having the options and having the information that you can draw from when you need it can be very beneficial. I once had one of my professors told me, it kind of stuck with me. He said, "You don't have to remember everything. It's like just put it in the well, and then you can draw it up whenever you need it." So it's like, so just kind of file it away, and then when you need it, it'll come back up. Okay, so there you go. So we are coming close to the end of our time. And Dr. Michelle, do you have something you would like to leave the viewers with today?
I would love for people to think about the way their day starts and the way their day ends, and how they can bring movement into those two parts of the day to set themselves up for a great day, and to be able to calm themselves at the end of the day before they try to go to sleep, so that they have two places where they always know they're going to bring that harmony back in. And then it's going to be much easier for middle of the day to start to throw things in, because the beginning and the end, you know, you've got this routine. Then it'll start to seep into things that are going on in the day, where it's often easier to choose to go for a walk at lunchtime or something like that. But really start your day there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been a very valuable conversation. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing your expertise. We've seen how movement can be a powerful tool for releasing trauma and restoring balance in the body. If you're curious and you want to try this, remember, start small, gentle stretches, mindful breathing, or even just paying attention to where you hold tension and doing, quick little release techniques to release the tension. They can all go a long way. Don't forget to check out Michelle's channel. She has a lot of great videos there for Tai Chi movements you can do. I particularly like the chair Tai Chi movements. Those are really easy, really gentle to use. And yeah, find what resonates with you, what makes you feel safe and comfortable. because that movement, whether you realize it or not, will help you to be able to let go of that tension and that trauma that you're holding in your body, that if you hold on to it for too long will eventually manifest itself into other things. One of the things I try to help my clients understand is that, in a nutshell, chronic disease and illness is basically caused from all of this chronic stress that gets pent up and stuck in your body and it has nowhere to go. So that stress causes the tension, and then it causes a malfunction in those areas of the body. And then that malfunction, you know, just keeps bigger and it grows into these symptoms. And then when you get a collection of symptoms, that's when you have disease, because disease is a collection of symptoms. And so we always strive to see what's causing the symptoms. The symptoms are caused by imbalances. What causes the imbalances? And most of the time, those imbalances are going to be caused by stress, whether it's physical stress or emotional stress. So, having the tools to be able to take care of that can help you down the road, to help you deal with chronic issues if you already have them, or be able to hold them off if you don't. So, just, take all of that into consideration, find something that works for you, and just go ahead and get started. So, let us know how you like this. If you in the comments, if you like hearing about how you can use movement for emotional healing. If you yourself have used movement for emotional healing, we would love to hear your story and what you have to say about that. And if you found this conversation helpful, please, be sure to subscribe and share this with someone else who might benefit. So that is it for today's episode. Until next time, remember, wellness isn't a destination, it's your daily journey. Bye. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
This episode is brought to you by Living Naturally for Life, the Greenwell Center for Holistic Health, and Cape Breton Tea Company. Comment, like, subscribe.